Phrasal verbs with into is the topic for today. Now, we'll start with the easy ones. Go into a room, creep into a room, dash into a room. Please use any of those verbs with walking. You can watch those on my video about ways of walking. With into, and it means go into the room, yeah? Or go into a building or something like that. But you could also creep into a room, or dash into a room, sprint into a room, hobble into a room, amble into a room. There's all sorts of ways of walking. Please use as many of them as possible, and enhance your vocabulary. You can also plough into someone. If you're in your car and you plough into someone, you crash into them, you run them over. There's another old phrasal verb to remember, run over. If it's a person, but you can crash into a tree, you can bash into someone when you're walking down the street, you can bash into someone. So a lot of these phrasal verbs with into are about a collision of some description, some kind of collision, when you collide into someone. We'd even say collide into as well. Now, break into, if you break into a shop, then you enter it illegally. If you break into a house, you are a burglar. But it can also mean to start doing something. So when somebody breaks into a sweat, they start sweating profusely, perhaps. They start sweating. But if somebody breaks into a song, they start singing. So it could be used like that, to start doing something. And here it becomes very similar to burst into tears. Yeah, he burst into tears. Remember, we say burst out laughing, but burst into tears. And oh, indeed, there's another one, burst into flames. We also say burst into flames, and it means, explode here. It burst into flames. When something bursts into flames, it explodes. So it means start burning in that sense. So it's still a start, and certainly burst into tears, it means start crying. Start crying violently, perhaps, or start sobbing, start really crying to a large extent. Okay, bump into or run into someone. You intentionally meet them, maybe on the street, maybe you're walking down the high street, you're going shopping, and you bump into an old friend. Okay, if you buy into something, it could just mean that you're buying into a company and you're buying their shares. That's one possible meaning, invest. But it's very common now to say, I don't buy into this, and it means I don't believe this. It's an exact synonym of believe when it's used like that. I don't believe this, I don't buy into this. And the idea is that somebody's trying to sell you an idea, but you don't buy into it. You're not buying. Okay, so remember, it means believe as well. If you dig into something, you could be doing research. You could be digging into, pyramids in ancient Egypt, and it would mean you're researching the pyramids. But you could be looking into them as well. That would also mean research. So look into is a synonym of dig into. But you can also dig into your meal. And then it means start eating. So remember, this into is very often used with a starting sense, with a nuance which means start doing something. Okay, if you dip into your savings, it means you spend a little of your savings, and it does sound like a bit every time. You spend a bit, you spend a little of your savings. If you dip into a book, you read a little bit. Yeah, you read a little of the book when you dip into a good book. But it could also be physical. You can dip your feet into the water. It would be possible. I'd normally say dip my feet in the water myself, but I suppose there are ways where you can say my toes dipped into the water, something like that. Okay, if you enter into negotiations, for example, you start the formal process of negotiations. You can enter into negotiations, you can enter into a peace talk, or talks about ceasefire, or I think it's very common to be used in some kind of agreement like that, some kind of treaty or document or negotiation or contract. You might enter into a contract with another party. So it's enter into agreements, contracts. contracts, treaties. But we can also use it in a much more informal sense, meaning to be relevant. And so if you say whether the candidate is male or female, well, that doesn't enter into it. It means that's not important. That's completely irrelevant. We don't care whether the candidate is male or female. That's not important to us. It's irrelevant. It doesn't enter into it. Okay? Very common expression. It doesn't enter into it. Okay, if something eats into your savings, that means that your savings are being corroded. They're being eroded. They're being consumed. Perhaps all the taxes you pay. I think all of us, we pay a lot of taxes, and these taxes eat into our savings. They eat away at our savings. They chip away at our savings. These phrasal verbs were on the video with away, and they also mean erode or consume. So eat into, it's like eat away at. Get into means become involved in, so you can get into a difficult situation, you can get into trouble. There are a lot of, it's quite often used negative like that. Get into, get into a nasty situation, or get into a problem, get into some kind of trouble. Very often used with trouble. So perhaps you should remember that that's quite often in a negative sense, but it doesn't have to be. It could be just used in the physical sense. I got into, a box or something like that. If you grow into something, then it could mean the physical sense, but we don't often use it like that. But it could mean the physical sense. It's growing into the trees. The branches of the trees were growing into the shed. But it could mean become accustomed to something with age, as you mature. And so you might say that youngsters may not like the tastes of adult food, spicy food, for example. But as they get older, they grow into it. As they get older, they like spicier and spicier food, and in the end, they grow into it. Now, if you lay into someone, it could mean two forms of attack to lay into. It could mean physical, or it could mean when you just say bad things to someone, when you criticize someone, when you had a good word here, when you berate someone, scold someone. It could mean physically though, which would be beat someone up. Don't forget that great phrasal verb, beat someone up. Or it could mean berate or scold, meaning tell someone off. Berate is the same as tell someone off. Scold, reprimand, those kind of words. Tell someone off. So when a teacher may lay into a student for being late, but I don't think we'd mean there that he's beating him up. We would mean that he told him off, he berated him, he scolded him. Okay, if you rip into someone, you usually verbally attack someone. Verbally attack, I would say, verbally attack. Whereas if you tear into someone, well, I would say very often tear into is the same as rip into. It's verbally attack. If you tear into someone, you attack them, you reproach them, you scold them, you tell them off basically for whatever it is they've done that's annoyed you. Now, if you squeeze into something or slip into something, it sounds like you're putting something on. If you're squeezing into it, it's obviously something that's tight. So tight clothes, you're putting on some kind of tight clothes. And so we could use those two for putting on. And tap into, if you tap into someone's if you maybe you're the boss of a company and you want to tap into your the creativity of your staff, it means you want to access the creativity of your staff. But maybe you're a manager and you want to access some profit from a particular part of the market, and so you might say we want to tap into the market segment which is full of under 35s or something like that. We want to tap into that market segment. We want to start accessing that market segment. It's to access a resource of some way, very often to make profit, but it could be, it's very often used in business when you're accessing some kind of resource, maybe creativity, maybe somebody's energy, maybe somebody's money, maybe it could be a lot of different things. But when you tap into that area, you access it, you access the resource from that area. Okay, if you talk someone into something, you persuade them to do something. Talk someone into something, it's just persuade them to do something, and it's the opposite of talk someone out of something. Remember that out of is very often the opposite of into. It certainly is in the physical sense. Okay, I hope all of those are clear. Please, if you have any questions about these words, please put them under the video. If you want more examples for these words, please go to Oxford Dictionary. Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary will give you hundreds of more examples, or maybe not hundreds, but a lot more examples, and perhaps better than the examples I've given here. But I hope this gives you an idea of what these phrasal verbs with into are about. So thanks very much for watching. I hope to see you all soon.